Hello, everybody. I'm Martin Jean. I'm director of the Yale Institute of Sacred Music. We're an interdisciplinary graduate center here at Yale for the study and practice of sacred music, worship, and the related arts. And we are continuing our series once again with interviews on the ground, as it were, using our socially distant, mediated, inflected methods of Zoom and whatnot. And today I'm joined by one of my colleagues in Yale Divinity School, Abdul-Rehman Malik. Professor Malik is an award-winning journalist, educator, and cultural organizer. In June 2019, he was made lecturer and associate research scholar at the Yale Divinity School, and he also serves as program coordinator for Yale's Council on Middle Eastern Studies. So very welcome to you, Professor Malik. How are you today?
It's great to be here, Martin, and thank you so much for having me.
Great to see you, AR. The spring of 2020 brings many convergences, right? We've already discussed this. On the one hand, we're in a season that brings into close calendrical proximity these major feast days of many of the world's religions. And it's a laundry list almost, right? Passover, Easter, the birth of Buddha, the Sikh New Year, as many festivals around the planting of crops and the sowing of crops. And of course, our topic for the day, the holy month of Ramadan. And yet, with this, alongside of this one convergence, we have a very different convergence, which is, of course, that we are all around the world in the same, very similar kind of context of social isolation. And somehow or other, those of us who observe these feast days are asked or we're forced to celebrate these in a very different way from other years. So on the one hand, world religions celebrating their own feast days at the same time, but doing it from a very isolated or very socially distant context. And that's what we want to talk about and explore a little bit with Ramadan today. So just remind us a little bit of the background, if you wouldn't mind, AR, and just remind us why is this month sacred in Muslim communities? What does it entail? What are the practices typically associated in Muslim communities around Ramadan?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Martin. And just to begin, you're absolutely right. You know, it's amazing how our various sacred calendars have converged, I think, at this particular moment, at this particular time of crisis. And I honestly feel really deeply that there's some great divine providence in this. I think it is in these moments of celebration and marking the sacred and marking our sacred calendars that we find hope, inspiration, and strength. And God knows we need that this year more than ever, and particularly those of us who are on the front lines of meeting the crisis of COVID. The nurses, the doctors, the essential workers are the people who deliver our post.
Yeah.
And so I just want to recognize them along with you, and our colleagues have been incredibly supportive, and I think from the YDS, what we've gotten from our colleagues is incredible prayer, hope, and support, and also a constant reminder to remember those who are really at the sharp edge of this crisis.
Indeed.
Ramadan is the 9th month in the Islamic lunar calendar, and it forms a kind of essential act of worship for Muslims. Among the famous 5 pillars of Islam, the 5 sort of iconic ritual practices of Islam, fasting, or Saum in Arabic, is one of them. And Saum as a concept, the idea of fasting as a concept, of course, is year round. It's something that we share deeply with our sister Abrahamic religions, but also with the world religions who see abstinence and fasting as a form of deep self-purification. Ramadan is formalized in a slightly different way. The lunar calendar is based around months that are either 29 or 30 days in length. The start and the end of those months is decided by the cycle of the moon. Of course, now though that cycle is sort of set down scientifically, and we know when the moon is born and when can be
Mhm.
seen, but traditionally, the beginning and the end of the Islamic lunar months were an opportunity for the community to literally go out into into the hills and to try and spot the moon. And so each month begins with the birth of the new moon and actually seeing the new moon in our traditional way of marking the sacred calendar. So once the moon is seen, the month of Ramadan begins. What does that month entail? It means it's 29 or 30 days of fasting and abstinence between sunrise and sunset. That means between the beginning of the sun breaking over the horizon to the moment that the sun begins to dip below the horizon. Those who are fasting within the Muslim tradition don't eat, we don't drink, we don't engage in intimate relations with our partners, and we kind of deny ourselves sensually. We try to fill that time, of course, with work, with our day-to-day lives, with raising our families, with teaching, with service. But what's vital is that this sense of abstinence and this idea of fasting builds in us, hopefully, a physical emptiness, which leads to a spiritual openness. It's really interesting, Martin. When I was growing up, my friends used to ask me, "Well, Abdul, what happens if you feel really hungry one day and you decide to have a tuna sandwich?" And what'll happen to you? And I said, well, I really thought that to myself, and I remember speaking to my parents about it. And one of the things that I learned really at a young age was that fasting has an incredibly communal aspect, but it's also very individual and personal. It's a very personal and intimate act of devotion. I'll tell you what I mean by that. As a community, we mark Ramadan. In the morning, our families will get up and will prepare the morning meal. I'm the morning meal preparer in my house and have been for a long time. I love that hour before the beginning of the fast, which is the beginning of the morning prayer time. I like getting up that hour early. I'm a coffee obsessive, and I can't give up coffee for Ramadan. So I make myself a good liter, a good pint of
Yes.
coffee, and I sip it back as I make breakfast for everyone. We get everyone up, then we pray together, and we begin the fast day together. And the evening time, what is known as the iftar time, it's a time for family and community to come together, a time of sharing of food with ourselves, our families, our friends, our neighbors, the community around us, a heightened awareness of those who have and those who don't have. Um, and yet, during the fasting day, if I wanted to, Martin, I could go into my office, close the door, and have a cup of water, have a sip of coffee, and no one would be the wiser. Because fasting, it is said, is the Quran tells us that fasting is for me. God says to us in the Quran, fasting is for me, and I will reward it and I will edify it as I will. The Prophet Muhammad reminded us constantly that fasting is that you are responsible for your fast, and that there's various levels of fasting, isn't there? There's this fasting where we just deny ourselves food and drink and intimacy, but then there's also that kind of fasting that we're encouraged to engage in, which is about that heightened awareness, an acute understanding of our own sinfulness, of our own arrogance, of our own ego, and then to actively try to transform that into a daily awareness around service.
Yeah.
And so that encompasses sort of the fasting day. And one last thing I'll mention is that in terms of ritual, Martin, one of the important features of Ramadan is that on the 27th night of Ramadan, historically, the Muslims believe was the beginning of the revelation of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad when he was visited by the angel Gabriel in this kind of almost this kind of incredible moment of the meeting of the divine and the human, what our Christian friends would call the ultimate thin place between the divine and the human, at that thin place where the prophet was in meditation on the cave of Hira. The angel Gabriel comes to him in the Quran. The revelation of the Quran begins. So the whole month is about celebrating the Quran and the revelation of the Quran. So usually in our mosques, every night after the late evening prayer, the Isha prayer, there's a special prayer of 20 cycles. And over the course of 20 cycles, which sometimes can take an hour to an hour and a half of standing, bowing, prostrating, and rising, the entire Quran is recited over 30 days. Often over 27 days, and usually by memory, by someone who has memorized the Quran in a melodious way. So you stand in prayer listening to the
Yeah.
revelation as if it was coming to you. And of course, that's one of the things that is really iconic about Ramadan. It's one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, that as we now head into a month where we won't have that sense of community in the same way, what is that celebration of the Quran going to look like? And what is the marking of the opening and the closing of the fast going to look like? And the time that we spend together in those moments afterwards, with one another.
I mean, you've hit on the nub of it, of course. So on the one hand, Ramadan is this very, um, it's from my perspective, a kind of a private practice. It has to do with you and your body, yourself.
Mm.
But it has very much this communal aspect, right? The community coming together around prayer and meal and service and so on. Well, what does this coming together look like? What might it look like? What is your ear to the ground telling you?
We've been thinking a lot, and the conversations are the conversations around this are global. I have to say, for every part of the world, this year, Martin, for the first time in memory, there will be no congregational prayers at the holy mosques of Mecca and Medina during the month of Ramadan. And that, I think, just psychologically and spiritually is such a remarkable it's just such a remarkable moment.
Yeah.
And yet, I think spiritually, our sages and the teachers, the women and men and people of spirituality remind us that our faith is not tied to a place, is not tied to a symbol, is not tied to a mosque or even a sacred space, that ultimately God is close.
Mhm.
And so I think one of the things that we've been talking about a lot this year is, how do we strengthen the family? How do we this year make sure that at least those who are within the four walls of our house, and those that we can with safety access and reach, how can we make this a positive experience for them? How can we institutionalize some of these sacred practices in our homes? How can we take that corner of our living space aside and almost consecrate it and sanctify it and say, this is going to be a place of spiritual gathering? So a lot of families have already begun to do that. Here in New Haven, our wonderful and inimitable chaplain, Imam Omar Bajwa, was the chaplain in Muslim Life Program, part of Sharon Kugler's amazing team down at Bingham House on main campus. Omar and his wife Lisa and members of the community have been working with Masjid al-Islam, are the largely African American mosque on George Street, to ensure that the gatherings that we would have been having, that we are kind of redirecting funds and resources to ensure that at least once a week there's 150 or 200 packaged meals that are available, particularly to members of the community who are struggling right now with issues around employment and housing and so on. I think as that fund grows, we were able to raise 4 Fridays worth of meals literally in 48 hours. As that fund continues to grow, our hope is to continue to have that sense of generosity. And that generosity, of course, is for everyone. I mean, one of the beautiful things here at Yale has been that on the weekly community iftars or fast breaking, we have all of our friends come, people from the community, people of all faiths and none, to join together in breaking the fast usually with date and water, and then having a meal together. In terms of devotions, what we're doing right now, Martin, is being amplified into sacred spaces in the same way that Easter and Passover
Yes.
were being marked on Zoom.
Yeah.
And we had so many of our colleagues leading liturgy and leading scriptural recitations and readings and commentary. Will be doing the same. And so all around the world, there are teachers of the Quran, there are reciters of the Quran who have pledged every night to continue to read. And so I think what will start to happen as of as of Thursday night, the night before the full day of fasting, is that we will be gathering around the new hearth, the hearth of the screen,
Wow.
and we'll be listening to the Quran being recited with our children. And I think the third thing that I'd say that's happening, Martin, that I think has been really interesting is that, communities want to maintain a sense of community. Here at Yale, the Yale students want to have a sense of sharing this experience with other students. And so there's gatherings that are happening already online, study circles,
Mm.
discussion groups, reflections on Friday to mark the sacred day and sacred day of the week of the Muslim calendar.
Mm.
So this is all kind of happening at the same time. And I just think what's going to happen is 1,000, 10,000 flowers will bloom. I think we're going to be actually, we're going to have so much choice in terms of what's going on out there. So our friends, for example, in the Muslim Anti-Racist Collective and an incredible African-American Muslim platform called Sapelo Square are organizing something called Black Iftar, celebrating the African-American Muslim traditions of iftar and breaking the fast and gathering, and they're moving that online. We have friends from different Sufi orders who have a certain spiritual practices which enhance the daily ritual worship. They're taking those online, so you're seeing gatherings and litanies of remembrance being recited online, but also sacred dance being done in various places, and people encouraged to participate at home. I think that's all going to be part of it. So in a way, I think we've pivoted fast. I think there is going to be a sense of loss around this sense of community, but also I think a renewed sense of purpose, that ultimately the fasting day is between myself and my Lord.
Mm.
And that there's this intimacy that comes from emptiness and emptying out that builds over the course of the month, and that spiritual energy shouldn't be lost. And that if anything, we should be checking in on our friends. How you doing today? How is it going? Is there anything that we can do for each other? Pray together, read together, support one another through this. Listen to beautiful music and sounds to make sure that there's a lot of good energy flowing through us through the fasting days. So I'm confident, Martin. I'm confident that we're gonna meet this challenge as our brothers and sisters and friends have in other communities, in the same way. And my real only regret is that I love sharing Ramadan with our friends, particularly those who are not Muslim. And I love kind of welcoming people into our home, and that's something I think we're going to miss, and we're going to have to make up for later on.
We'll look forward to future opportunities for that. Your positive energy is infectious, and
Thank you, Martin.
were I to find this in my own communities, of course I do, and I'm grateful for it. But very much as though some of our senses have been sort of cut off in a way. Other senses are being heightened, right? And we're sort of denied certain opportunities, we're finding others that have been there all along.
Yeah.
Right? This kind of connectivity, this kind of
Mm.
ability to reach out across large geographical expanses, and we're discovering that as a great blessing. So at the same time, we have to remember, don't we, the people who do not have access to this kind of
Absolutely.
technology and these kind of resources, and remember them and provide for them as best we're able. AR, thank you very much for this time today.
Oh, it was absolute pleasure, Martin, and I want to echo that I think we're going to begin this month with constant prayers and remembrance of those who have been really affected by this in ways that I think that some of us, myself included, who have the privilege of home and security, often actually struggle to come to understand properly. And I think if anything this Ramadan does, it should be about connecting to the fullness of our communities and finding those ways in which we can be servants to the incredible leaders who are in those communities doing pretty remarkable remarkable work. And thank you, Martin, for hosting these conversations. I've already listened to a few of them and enjoyed them very much, and enjoyed hearing from our colleagues very much, and hoping that we're all going to be back on the quad soon.
There'll be more of these conversations to come, and as this one airs, I believe we're airing this on the day in the evening of which Ramadan begins.
Wonderful.
To you and your family and your colleagues and your communities, I wish you a very good fast, and blessed.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And to our listeners, we pray for safety and good health, and we hope that you'll continue to watch our website, isf.yale.edu, for more of these kind of conversations in the near future. Very good day to all of you, and blessed Ramadan.